Travel around Haert. By L.T. Zupan. Read by L.T. Zupan. Published by Leo Thomas Zupan IV. Copyright 2017 by Leo Thomas Zupan IV. Escape Aid 1. Quote, "For them it is just hearsay. They have heard it. They don't know it because they've never reached to their heart. But the meditator finally reaches to the heart. As he has reached to the center of his being, the third center, suddenly an explosion of love and compassion and joy and blissfulness and benediction has arisen in him with such a force that it hits his heart and opens the heart. The heart is just in the middle of all your 7 centers, 3 centers below, 3 centers above. You have come exactly to the middle." End quote. Osho. Chapter 6. Austin. One. Austin. When its heat is peak, I learned slow walks. Pressured and forced and solidified is the exit plan. Still unexecuted, Iruta, Maya, presented Ben close to departure, while trembling, nervous, with organite, a word worth research. An organite heart. With it around, and to travel around with, round earth, a heart, quelled my final fear. She, Latin, appeared and moved by heart, explained basic España. The stories of American-Mexican veterans and Zipolite, emotions and surprises, homeless, days painting more numbers on curbs, until the final sale completed, bank notes. "This is the last curb in the States," was said, receiving negative hospitality. "You'll feel better if you did it all yourself." He kept the Be Here Now book, and I went to the Greyhound bathroom and put the rolled, roughly $40 in cavity. 2 The border is Matamoros, Brownsville, in southeastern Texas. From Austin to the border was, and is, in a way, new. The scenery cleared and magnified somewhat. We arrived at the border, and I said farewell in Brownsville to the States. Chapter 7. Mexico. One Mexico. Massive in many ways. Overall kind. Though too many police. Viva Mexico. I was worried walking into Migración in Matamoros. An advertisement said, "You'll like the way we do business," and that quelled the worry. The Mexican police didn't care that I could have had a warrant. They just wanted 250 pesos, $22 or something. At the time, I liked the way they did business. After more worry, they led me through to the Latin bus terminal. Worries friends had of abductions were shared by bus officials, so they rushed me to a chair and the first bus. Before the first bus, south through Veracruz, I waited on a chair, acclimating, adjusting, tripping out. For one, Brownsville is very empty and stark. The brief trip to the terminal through Matamoros was a surprise. It was like NYC ghettos meet Latin to the naive me at that time space. I was concerned about homelessness at night in that environ. Sitting at the terminal chair, I drank Coca-Cola and noticed how everyone spoke Spanish. It dawned on me how different this was in actual reality lived. A greater purity they had, closer family bonds, brighter eyes, and very little and basic negative energy. I also noticed the cliché and true Latin fire. For one, I didn't have to know what was being spoken about, at least mentally, around me. For two, logistics were strained, even poquito ones. Two bus officials ran to me, looked at ticket, and escorted me to bus. Almost identical to an American bus, with Spanish películas. I fell asleep until the next bus change at the Veracruz station. I purchased tobacco there, Marlboros, Reds for then, which were half American cost, where I smoked with Coca-Cola. The next bus went through Tampico, which was like parts of Florida, being tropical, only less developed, more of the palm tree, patches of grass, hills, and sun, a mild respite. Inland to Oaxaca, followed a smooth and mellow trip, curving through mountain desert elevation changes to Oaxaca bus terminal, ADO, first class, 2 30 note units remained, so purchasing coffee, café, and a final bus ticket for Porto Angel produced 200 peso in remation. While in terminal 20 hours, having a food less future, I called Audrey for help. She said, "Ask of the church." I hung the phone, very hurt. Two men with fake bus officials' outfits appeared asking for my ticket and money. After noticing the way other customers responded, I knew it was a scam. I said no and pointed to the office, where they said I could sleep at the terminal, no problem. In the 2/3 of a day spare time, I walked around Oaxaca. The streets and sidewalks were very narrow, and the vehicles tiny, honking regularly, and not only when angry. Wild or stray dogs peppered the streets, as Latin America generally does not keep dogs as pets. Shops and stands and walking vendors and sellers of trinkets, jewelry, hamacas, candy, cigarros approached any tourist somewhat aggressively and approached locals to a less aggressive, though still annoying pitch. I discovered the center square, parks and churches. Later, I noticed every Latin American town center has churches, iglesias, and parques. There, a beautiful town center, I walked around and had a cappuccino at a restaurante patio. Walking around a bit, I finally spotted hippie travelers. They smoked mota, aka ganja, with me, and the language barrier proved awkward. One Brazilian craft seller, who crocheted and embroidered, hippie traveler, spoke English. He told me Zipolite and Mazunte, my first real destination, 2 hours from Oaxaca, were good people, and that he had traveled all the way from Brazil. The Amazon was the goal at the time. Small children approached repeatedly to sell miscellany. I heard Gringo once in the background. Can't say I blame them. I returned to the terminal, slept overnight, rode curvy hours to Zipolite. 3. The first was Pochutla, then a $1 bus to Porto Angel. Angel, with soft G. A spherical bay with many boats and pricier hotels. Similar vibe to Trinidad, California, subtracting the hotels. A short trip from there put me at Zipolite entrance. I walked to the shore, asked where Shambhala was. Amidst cheap hostels, living quarters, and tangled driftwood, I came to river. A river that poured water to merge with ocean. A man appeared and introduced himself on the way to Gloria's Shambhala. So I stopped and he stopped and we spoke. Miguel, Spanish of Michael, started speaking his language. I spoke mine. And we both, through hearts and eyes, perceived. There's a code to how to gather money from those who have excess, and a code to withhold you are not excessive. He convinced me to buy him beers, and gave him tobacco, and he smoked a mainly leafy joint. I had been sober 4 days. It hit the spot. A little dazed, I gathered and walked the rest of the way up the beach hill to Gloria's Shambhala. In a sense, this is where this book finally begins. Gloria wasn't in, but the staff explained to a bilingual hotel guest. Shambhala is restaurant, hotel, and spiritual center. That I came all the way from Tejas. They were cleaning mud from ill-positioned cabanas. I slept the night there and began work exchange, being naive for the almost last time. 4 ... Mud. Mexican Hitler. Graciano. Mary Juana, a.k.a. Mota. I stayed at Gloria's Shambhala about a month. Gloria is, now past, an elderly Spanish-American hippie, retraceables of the father, who honors Kuan Yin. Gloria was truly sad, sorrowful, depressed. In her late 60s or 70s, she retained a failed effort. Though successful in some crucial ways, she was terse but true. She refused when I offered the heart to her. She acknowledged and perceived the way I helped. Gloria established the link between Maya and America. Fuck yeah, America. Fuck yeah. Some Australian plastic people came, and when they were told not to drink there, they implied threat. A snake appeared at the same time, and one of the Aussies said, "Hey, it's okay, it's just a little tree snake." Then they departed. A wood carving of her displayed overlooking the ocean, very craggy and crumgy, Gloria's jade on her shoulder. I found her chosen spot in her creation to be beautiful and parts of it sacred, along with Kuan Yin. And so it is that Gloria respects me. A poor shaman gave advice about the heart pendant. I moved mud, lots of mud, 10,000 shovels, under the direction of Alfredo, who had a Hitler mustache. The shaman said, "We don't need amulets here." I grew more attached to Talus Haert as a result. This one girl, played games with me and illustrated how out of tune, touch, or sync she is with Haert. I found, hidden next to the main shore or cove, a small rocky dome of shore, ocean water, and rock wall. It was described by others and called by name Playa la l'Amor, the beach of love. A heavy rock was as a chair, and I placed the Haert under it for 21 days. 3 sevens. Graciano was an alcoholic, with codependence issues with Gloria. He was a friend, though I grew to dislike him and we drifted apart. After enough mud was moved and removed, I moved to painting. Much easier effort. Gloria spoke of the zen of labor, and I bought into that for 200 pesos every week and an occasional pack of tobacco. I am no longer naive. She said people will come if the cabanas are repainted. So I repainted 3 cabanas. Still naive. One evening out, I met an old man, doors away from the shop bar restaurant of the Quebecois, and his Latin wife who purely loved him. And the old man had traveled the world and loved the Asian women, missed Asia, and wanted to borrow my Bible for Psalms and Proverbs. We didn't meet at length again. Graciano is an old friend of Gloria's and worked to stay at Shambhala. She drank nothing. He oscillated between nothing and heavy drinking. I grew to like Graciano, and then lost interest. He sought girls in an often base way, yet he was a great artist. I had learned from previous travels how people who are afraid of travel will project that onto others, so it was easy to pull away for a weekend to San Jose del Pacifico, though it took overnight in the forest, sleeping with Victoria Ale. 5 Halfway between Oaxaca and Zipolite, an hour or so bus trip, are the 2 tiny towns of San Mateo and San Jose del Pacifico, both fairly high in the mountains. The first day and night, San Mateo. I walked first to the center and basketball court. Graciano had named 2 old heroin addict Americans who retired in San Mateo. There were thousands, if not hundreds, of tobacco cigarette ends in the chimney. We spoke through the night. They gave me food, and I left for San Jose the following morning, a 10-minute walk away. Catalina's was recommended by the opiate heads for a work-trade hostel, which is what my naivete requested. Another Miguel operated Casa de Catalinas, pronounced Catalinas, as the owner, Catalina, was traveling elsewhere. They are both shamans, her more a witch, I uncovered. So Miguel agreed to trade room and food, 2 fair meals a day, for miscellaneous work. The weather in San Jose provided small windows for working. Miguel was addicted to work. I am not. Miguel was similar to Castaneda's lineage, occasionally condescending. He would get irritated when there was no work. A female helped work, and he gave her candy condescendingly as a reward and insult because she didn't work enough. He told me I needed to learn that all we enjoy comes from work. I said no, and departed. Though I did learn much from him. Miguel had a brown, blackish stone that was occasionally opiated hash. With every breath of it, reality dissolved its veil, or veil. Our different perspectives wedged separation, and Miguel compared my hitchhiking departure to a careening mountain bird in a kind way. A quick hitch, and I returned to Shambhala, they had thought I would not return. San Cristobal, Posh, De Las Casas, and Palenque were recommended by a Canadian Zipolite restaurant owner who spoke Quebecois, and by Graciano, though with fear and overconfidence, non-respectively. I worked another week, grew disgusted by the tourists and Shambhala's recent stagnancy, and exited for San Cristobal first, Palenque being close after. 6 ... So I walked miles and hitched through Juchitán de Zaragoza and Arriaga into San Cristobal. A car bought me nachos in Arriaga. Many desert mountain miles walked. San Cristobal was then a pleasant surprise. The similar narrow roads, ways, and walk paths as Oaxaca, the very colorful painted building and house walls. I scoured for a place for work trade, finally found Miguel. Yes, another Miguel. His place adjunct or adjacent Casa Libertad. Miguel, being a social figure pillar, had others at his house as well. I stayed 2 weeks, but very rarely worked. I was less naive and offered help as subtle planes. We studied self-sustainability at a farm in an event similar to a workshop, though free and better than the words work and shop. The climate of San Cristobal is harsh. Hot midday, cold at night. The elevation was mildly achy to sinuses. 2 Americans, Samuel, and woman, were projecting with Miguel as his quasi-activistism overlapped eco-cycling and array of small-scale constructions. After several parties with Miguel and his friends, one of which was at a cultural center called Paliacate, which is the name for the type of hat revolutionaries wear, I foolishly and naively hit on girls to no avail, and ate expensive brownies and cake and cookies. Another party was at Miguel's, and they played music, with a laptop and stereo system. I showed them MSI, mindless self-indulgence. One of the best multi-genre bands ever. After some drinking, Miguel and friends played guitar and sung. They focused on my singing, or some songs because I knew the English words. Redemption song I'm fond of, and I sang then and would now. After drinking a bit, some of the racism of Miguel's friends surfaced, though fairly mild, and no luck finding work with no fluency yet in Espanol. The ache got to me, and journeyed to Palenque for a supposed rainbow gathering posted on the Face book. 7 ... The trip that takes 1 hour in a car took 3 days hitching. The midway town Oxchuck, or something like that, was my first solo squat. It was the end of a marathon hitchhiking day. Oxchuck, or wherever, had an unbuilt cottage-sized structure in which I built a small fire of 2x8s and stayed awake paranoid for hours. The following day, Tuxtla Gutierrez was driven to by a rich kid who liked techno. I walked through the whole town, took 4 hours, and slept by a pile of dirt and gravel, abandoned by constructioneers. An hour or two, y Merida, the next morning brought me to Palenque, around 1 y Merida. The couple starting this gathering did so on their own, with Facebook, yet made it look official, at the cost of many disappointed travelers who expected to find seed camp, and instead all wound up at Panchan, a Palenque hostel with Mayan spirituality spread in stone circles and camping areas. Drunken hostel residents, fire-spinning surface gypsies, and many boom boxes, some drugs, howling monkeys, and people kin to them, and Rainbow Family, and small bongos all converged one evening. We all drank heavily, and became like the beauty aspects of ancient timeless vampire. 3 of us, 33, with glistening beauty eyes and glorious upper cuspids, reveling as ourselves. The climax of Palenque was the Israeli girl drinking Sky's ayahuasca potion and releasing her old attachments and problems stemming and rooted in the collective Israeli consciousness. Emmanuelle was a red-haired French woman who had a Quebecois friend, both smug, not snug, though probably. A teenage girl converted the heart to a necklace for free. I became an extra in a thriller pellicula filmed in Agua Azul, pronounced Azul, and upon payment I promptly spent over 1,400 pesos on myself and all around me. So I began wearing the heart, and it rested in lay center. One of the kids there temporarily traded shirts. He liked Bob Marley as a prophet and Jim Morrison because Jim is wild and a shaman. I finally began spanging when it was time to hitch again. 8 ... I thought of a story about how I needed to go to San Cristo, which was on the way to Lake Atitlan, or Lago Atitlan, and meet friends. I'm stranded, just need enough for the bus ticket there, 140 pesos. So in Palenque downtown, as tiny 2 Zipolites and half as big as SC, I first approached groups of European tourists, most of whom said no. Finally, a female who looked semi-hippie and somewhat kind. I told my story, and she offered lunch, where we talked spirituality and her awareness that the Star of David is a portal, opening doors for travel desired, and she gave all the money needed to return to SCDLC. Back in San Cristobal, I spanged a male European who also took me out to have a beer. A Spange learning experience. I was drawn into a web with this lonely European who bought me a drink and gave me euros. I kept it as brief as possible and spanged one other who just gave unconditionally. Sitting on a bench, I met old co-workers from Shambhala who were going to Guatemala. I saved money for food and rode with them. There are many topes and speed stumps in Latin America because everyone drives as fast as possible. Before the border, we passaged through 33 topes, and the driver called the town Tope Town because it had a similar syllabtia. They laughed and laughed. I was dropped at the border after Comitan, which had energizing and dry sun refreshing quality that made you want to wear sunglasses and feel cool. Chapter 8, Guatemala. 1 ... Guatemala, meaning many trees. Crazy Guati, Mali. Leaving the frontera, I walked through the border, skipping the stamp. My cousin said Guatemala has a system they use where I would wind up in prison for my warrants. Child support as one in U.S. It was a problem later because they checked previous stamps when leaving countries. I walked past Migration and through the town of Instantly there was much more chaos. Many more stands of fruit, vegetables, trinkets, foods, juices, and many more people approaching to attempt to sell. I went forward, ate chicken from one stand, and walked to the edge of town where two semi trucks were transporting to Quetzaltenango, and they offered a ride and a few bumps of OK coca. In the back were two affiliates of the driver, and they were friendly, though awkward. We arrived in Shela, Quetzaltenango, and at a very barren residence complex that felt dusty and industrial, and fairly desert-esque. The trucker placed the garage for me to sleep. I was nervous, still was afraid of abduction, especially when I saw the shotguns they had, yet they assured me it was for self-defense and gave me 20 quetzales, $2. Quetzaltenango is a very industrial place with armed security in many places, armed with AKs. The apartment complex was empty inside almost completely. So the truck driver and his son were there, and seeing him with his son was enough to calm me down. There were little to no possessions in the apartment, which also worried me. With time, I calmed down and gave to sleep. At 5 a.m., I was transported to the Crucero intersection, closest to the lake, and the many towns around the magical volcanic crater lake Atitlan. I slept in the corner of a driveway until golden sun appeared. The buses broke that day, and I had less than enough for one of the Colectivo basic van transports. So hours later, they accepted to transport me to San Pedro on the lake. Lake Atitlan has many towns on its shores, though it is an average-sized lake. The three prominent are Panajachel, San Pedro, La Laguna, and San Marcos La Laguna. Panajachel is the largest, though still small, and the most touristy. San Pedro is the little party town. San Marcos, the yoga spiritual little town, smaller than San Pedro. Most of the others are entirely Guatemalan. Santiago, very crafty. San Juan, nice. I arrived at San Pedro and walked through its alley roads. First, I re-met the Belgian that originally recommended San Pedro. Being finished with it, he passed the town over to me. Still walking, I met two rainbow family females, both from Bellingham, Washington. One was daffy, peculiar, and underweight. The other wide-hipped, a little overweight. They were a fitting travel duo. The skinny one was really quite unique. Never met another like her. We all supported each other for some time. Who I originally met at the Palenque unorganized rainbow gathering. We were happy to reconnect. Samuel and his woman friend, lover, had hurt me in San Cristobal, and being naive, I took his tarot deck. It may have been a gift, I forget. Less naive now, I never steal unless I'm dying, and even then probably not. He broke one of my teeth with a spontaneous spell. Complex story, but he apologized later. So I had a tarot deck and a hand-painted sign, Free Tarot, in some unsellable art with peace and love symbolos, made by this author, painted in Palenque. At the advice of the rainbow Caucasian female and the Asian American rainbow chica, I sold tarot reading on the street, though very few and very slowly. Then the Rainbowettes recommended the Freedom Bar to offer tarot, as its manager, Walter, an Italian, was supportive of fire spinners and those sorts of people. He even let them waitress, the rainbow females, just to help them out. We walked to Mama Something's hostel, where a German girl played guitar and sang vocal chords. I started to sing, and musical chemistry began our brief relationship. The musical and spoken language of Germany has many dimensions. Great softness, fragility, beauty, as well as strength and power. Some old German songs she played were gorgeous. Chemistry between us and music led to physical and romantic chemistry, though we didn't fuck, and barely kissed a few times. Yet danced, and we stayed as pure flow, and were satisfied, though her schedule made her leave a few days later. During the 3 weeks in San Pedro, a few gatherings happened, though I only went to one, on a lake island with mainly older hippie types and spiritualists. The lake has crystals evaporating through and emanating the surface. I met red-haired French Emmanuelle again, and she still had a developed body in her early 20s, but an undeveloped mind. So when she said, "It's just so crazy we keep running into each other," I sighed and disappeared from her presence. A red-haired male with freckles, aka Daywalker, coined by South Park, became rude with me at a party because he didn't believe in tarot. I told him I don't either, as we control the core of our fates. But divination, such as with the tarot, can be of benefit, while the amount belief invested is a choice. 3. The man from Belgium who recommended San Pedro back in Zipolite told me a story of becoming very drunk in San Pedro and telling, not asking, a Guatemalan woman to kiss. He stayed with her a month. I learned slowly how brute force is almost always a major component in Latin courtship. That awareness brought sorrow that still remains. So instead of a local woman, I became sexual and loving with a blonde French woman Walter introduced me to. Also had a brief affair with Alex, a beautiful soul who taught me much about coca, dominance, submission, though toyless, from Honduras. Chapter 9, Honduras. 1 Honduras, Baleadas, an enduring and excellent peoples who love play fighting and dank food. The border crossing was expedient, and I arrived at Coban with banknotes for a hostel. First, I went to a baleada food stand and was propositioned while the delicious baleada was preparing. The teenage boy said, "Hey, you like my sister? You think she's pretty? You want her now?" In a country where I believe prostitution is legal. I said no, politely. He said okay, and I ate the baleada. I went to the bar that night, having enough monies to purchase 2 drinks that cost money, and spoke with yet tourist female that can't relate. The following morning, I took a second-class bus to San Pedro La Sula, and then La Ceiba. San Pedro's terminal is like a shoddy mall, even with escalators, the food court partially gnarly. La Ceiba was an effort, arriving with no paper dollars, or lempira, as they call them there. My goal was to get to Utila Island via the ferry, so I began in downtown La Ceiba. I walked around looking for someone white, as locals are more difficult to spange for more than a few lempira. In 10 minutes I found someone. His name eludes us, but not the kindness. He first listened to the problems, then invited me to his apartment, where we ate food. We went to a mall first, and I called several people for help and received none. This is well before I destroyed my phone number list, still naive. Walking around, I found money on the ground. I considered it miraculous. The person helping me get to Utila did not. He said, "Someone just dropped it, no miracle," in so many words. So 2 hostels in La Ceiba let me stay for free in hamacas. One individual at a hostel did much cocaine with me and gave the needed paper money tree notes to cruise the ferry to Utila. At the waiting area for the ferry, I met a Chilean. Utila is north-central coast by Roatan. Part Chilean, part Canadian, he stirred a conversation on with me and discovered I had nothing. He offered to help and paid a few days at the hostel for me. The ferry was smooth and sizable. I looked at his artistry. His most proud piece was of an angel, looping and arcing overhead prayers, back swung down to a demon crescent semicircling below foot, and back as a curse, to complete a figure eight or infinity symbol. I prefer art with just beauty and love, and I politely explained that. So we were friends for a few days, and he purchased some coke for us. He was both generous and stingy, a true lover of duality, though I felt he was a little confused. On the island, they called me Rasta, because of the 5 dreads on my one head. So, drifted away from the Chilean, who rode around on a moped now. I met a Garifunda carabiner who smoked crack cocaine with me out of a soda can. We became tight friends. The crack opened my heart center for minutes, and I became cosmic. The energetic amplification surprised and shocked my friend, who was a regular Coca-Cola can crack cocaine smoker, and he looked out for me. His eyes, an aspect of divine, I'll call Jah, is what happens when I look deep in the eyes of Jah-type souls. Everything gets expansive like a freeway into the ocean, more spatial and cosmic, but still with love as well. I had no money, but I noticed lots of drug dealing, and so participated in connecting local dealers to tourists. Gorgeous tourists at that. Utila Island has the densest population of supermodel types of anywhere I've been to this day. They all seem to like diving. I think diving's okay. Probably great with an oxygen tank. Most of the island spoke English. The locals dispensed much wisdom, and received as well. As I write this, 11/11/12, the coffee is decaf. I saw another old man and was compelled to talk with him. He told me stories of people fucking with him and how he avoided that by threatening to call police. Eventually, some of the people I smoked crack cocaine out of tin cans with started looking for me as a mark to rob. A diver helped get me off the island with monetaries. 2... So I pursued crack further without addiction. Everyone's addictive. Relationship with it made its effect and environment tainted. So I wept for them as they abused it and quit. I spent one final night in La Ceiba with a new friend from Chicago. Narrowly, or maybe more than narrowly, avoided problems with police and locals in the party district, Zona Viva. My friend looked out for me as I did for him, back when I had friendships and relationships. So I had enough money to take a bus south, still going for the Amazon, to the capital city of Honduras, Tegucigalpa. Upon arrival, I experienced stress walking around the center. I sponged some money for food and tobacco, and slept with the crazies in the center square, by a closed-out building for the night. A huge capital city, I stayed safe and helped ground these few crazies. I hitched close to the border, and was stuck 45 minutes away in Frontera. A local restaurant owner saw me hitching for hours in the heat, and came out offering food, beverage, and money. He told me to ask the police for a ride, which I reluctantly did, and they happily helped, transporting me to the border at the Frontera. It cost $14 I didn't have to enter Nicaragua. The truckers there, very reluctantly, gave me the needed amounts. Chapter 10, Nicaragua. 1 Nicaragua. Ends with agua, I noticed, supposed. Hitching was, and probably is, very easy in Nicaragua. First through Chinandega, an equivalent to American ghetto, with organic houses and lots of mud and filth. The truck that picked me had females in the back with senses of humor that reminded me of the 90s. They said, Nicaragua is muy hot. So I arrived at Leon, hungry. I walked from the drop-off point to the centro and was unimpressed. Still, a priest helped me a little, and a fellow backpacker, as he called himself, got irritated, but helped. So I hitched and spanged to Managua, the capital city. The terminal in the city is very hectic. I asked locals for directions to the terminal that had buses to Granada. It was a hectic runaround to the appropriate place to take a bus to Merida, followed with another bus to Granada. Managua is chaotic, and the barrier of language caused a lot of redirects. Not a place I would want to stay lost in. I was pleasantly surprised by Granada. The old town is very pleasant and not too overrun by criminals or tourists. Old and Spanish, I stayed a night there in a hostel with money from tarot reading. When I first arrived, a teenage male appeared and said he was a guide for the city. And I said, I wonder where a few things are, but I have no money. He said, it's okay, after showing me where everything was, 2 or 3 places. He asked for a tip. After 10 minutes of showing him the contents of my gnarly bag, he shockingly absorbed that even though I was gringo white, I had, in fact, no money. So I spanged enough to get to the shore of a volcanic crater lake, Nicaragua, with Ometepe at its center. Staying at a hostel Magdalenas in a hammock at the base of the volcano. 2 So I arrived at Ometepe Island at dusk and walked to the hostel Magdalena. Yet before arriving, I get lost on a dirt road, and I come to a creek or small river and prayed for the first time in a while. My prayer was almost instantly granted. At the time, the prayer was for what my soul needed, a woman. The woman, Sarah, was bear-like, one of the little bears, and a Scorpio. She was both like a girl and a woman. We had sex with each other, having sex with each other. We had exceptional chemistry, but money mattered more to her, and I, at the time, had none. So we lasted 36 hours. While lost earlier that night, men offering moped taxi rides for $20 overpriced said, people like to beat me up, instead of helping a lost soul. After Sarah walking back to the ferry, I was spoken to by locals walking by, and I finally had to say, please, I will not talk right now with you, but much respect. So I left Ometepe with the same ferry. 3 I spanged with the ferry to accompany an individual to San Juan del Sur, close to the Costa Rican border. San Juan del Sur had a good vibe, with a fairly negative undercurrent, which I later discovered was just racism. I stayed just long enough to spange to the border. At the border it was easy to cross and free, though being evening, hard to hitch further. I slept the night on the side of some hills. The ants moved as one. I killed a few, then they all bit at once. I changed spots away from their home, and it mellowed. Chapter 11, Costa Rica. 1 Costa Rica, the rich coast, Pura Vida. La Cruz is a close town to the border. I arrived in the evening. I was told it's not the safest, so I went to Spange, a hostel first. I walked into the hotel and explained my situation. They let me stay for free. They gave me breakfast in the morning. I hitched just to La Cruz, then Spanged for buses ever since. Costa Rica and La Cruz was different from the rest of the Latin America Central countries. There were almost no street vendors, for one, less poverty, 23% below poverty line, and the money was 435 colones to $1. The nature was vastly lusher, full and glowing fern mist density. The shores of the ocean as a well. Liberia was next, a very whitewashed buildings place. I ate Burger King and spanged a European girl. She was in some type of foreign change pattern. Some old people gave money as well. Montezuma was recommended and calling to me, and the less costly, more common way was through Punta Arenas, and I appeared in Punta Arenas in the evening after the ferry stopped for the day. I walked around looking for someone to spange the world, being my new model motto. An old man told me where I could, as all the hotels refused to give a room gratis, sleep, and said it was one of the safest towns in CR. So I slept on a bench by a basketball court. The following day I spanged for ferry fare and connected with Euro tourists for a ride to Cobano, and walked with a hippie to the edge skirts of Montezuma. The hippie let me sleep in his tiny house. 2. In Montezuma, there were many hippies illegally camped on the beach, and spanging was ineffective. So I read tarot for food and tobacco. Sitting under a tree, I contracted head lice, or piojos, and began itching, until eventually shaving my dreadlocks off, later in this story. A teenage boy asked for a tarot reading one night. His question was about deciding to buy a scooter. While working all the time for almost no money, attempting to guilt me, I said unexpected positive things will happen. Ultimately, he was obsessed with work, and I helped alleviate that. So I spanged a way back to Punta Arenas and through to San Jose. Getting close to San Jose, a local informed me that the best way to go through San Jose is to be like a New Yorker. Go straight and make a beeline for the destination, don't talk with anyone. So I was dropped off at one terminal and went 4 or 5 blocks to the Coca-Cola terminal. It did look rather crackheadish, the walk there. From there, another bus to Cahuita, close to the Panama border and close to Puerto Viejo. Cahuita is a small Caribbean Rasta town. I fit in with just a few central parquet glares and stares. I drank at the main bar and heard great authentic live sweet reggae music. I spanged some tourists on the main strip, and free food asked some of the restaurants. One restaurant owner actually cared and brought dinner out and gave me a few thousand colones, $3 or $4 US. I slept by the ocean in a hidden spot and remained undisturbed all night. The following day I spanged to the border, passing and stopping briefly in Puerto Viejo, a more touristed Cahuita with more scary looks. Living in Costa Rica went smooth. Chapter 12, Panama. 1 Panama. Panamaniacs. A zippy strip with counterclockwise Panamanian Indians and decent countryside. At the migration counter, they run a scam. You must have an exiting Panama bus or plane ticket. If you don't, conveniently located is a bus ticket booth. So for those who don't know, they sell a ticket. I had a fake ticket, photoshopped from my friend's receipt, leaving San Salvador, not Panama, however. After fast, panicked, deep looks through eyes, they stamped my passport, saluted me, and I offered mucho gracias. I had enough for a bus an hour into Panama. At the terminal close to Tole, I had little luck spanging, so I walked into the town of blank. In blank. They were in the middle of a festival, wearing demonic masks and celebrating. I was still in need, so it disturbed me. Returning to the tiny terminal bus stop, I met other backpackers, and they floated me the $5 to get to Tole. In Tole, I walked miles to the tiny 4-block center and spanged by aggressive panhandling to get food and bus fare to David. David is significantly bigger than Tole. I spanged at the terminal upon arrival. An American overweight blonde woman, reminiscent of Ariel from LA, inquisited my complete story. After explaining it all, she offered a sleep-free for the night card, so to say, worth $11. I stayed up drinking and talking that night with a traveler who recommended places for future travel in Panama City. Finally, I spanged to Panama City. 2. Casco Viejo, the old town in Panama City. Mist spinning through fluorescent street lamp. Orange construction barrels, the like. The Lonely Planet Chosen Hostel, Black Cat or Luna something contained many plastic or mini plastique tourist backpackers from the US and Europe. I checked in and walked to Plaza Francaise, or French, or whichever. The plaza, one could turn in a circle and see Panama City, panoramic cityscape, and 2 oceans, unlike any other place I've ever been. After 2 days, I had no money and no one to help, so I determined how to get to South America hitching, the goal still being the Amazon, and still is. I couldn't travel by bus through the Darien Gap, a stretch of jungle with poisonous snakes and paramilitar, but an archipelago, or whichever word for a chain of San Blas islands, could be boat-hopped. So I went to Panama City yacht clubs first. The receptionist gave me $50 and referred me to the other yacht club, which referred me to Porvenir, the first of the Cunayala San Blas Islands. These islands run in a chain to Colombia from Panama. To get to the first island took 2 days waiting by San Ignacio. The first island was all business and money. No one would help me. I caught a boat ride to the second one. There I was quite the attraction. Drunk Indians pulled me into their world. Though the Cunayala Panamanian Indians have a portion of alcoholics, they were also mid-festival, so it was all the merrier and drunken, though upbeat. The islands are all huts, made from trees and plants and nature. The islands reminded me of rainbow gatherings, small children running to me saying, "Hola, where are you from?" And "Igi binigu," and "Como estas?" So I met European sailors and rowed a third of the way across islands. Mustupo is a main island and very boisterous. San Ignacio is very touristy, with Mormons even, whom I spoke with and received help from. The Cunayala are the happiest and most peaceful culture I've ever met. Towards the end of the chain of islands, I backtracked 3 islands back with an American who convinced me. He wanted me to stay and equated me with a horse brought to unwillingly drink water. He was about to partake in a ritual with driver ants. I told him my path was away. south first, then the next portion would be illuminated. Finally, I paid a cargo ship $37 to go to Turbo, the outskirts of Colombia, and endured their nature, and refused to eat the pigs' tails they were all consuming or eating. Chapter 13, Colombia. 1 dash 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 dash. So I only traveled from Turbo to Cartagena, then flew back. The bus from Turbo drove along the outside of the Amazonas. I could feel the forest even hours from it. In the bus, I met an Englishman named Paul, and I sing John Lennon cover songs. He toured or traveled South America. I did North and Central America. Our meeting made sense to us. In Cartagena, I snorted Colombian cocaine with a second Englishman, went to a club and met a hot girl who had the real Colombian fire coke. I had smoked some earlier, and the peak was all light and vibrations. With her stuff, it was more euphoric, less transcendent or satori, and lasted much longer. At the peak of communicative bliss, I said, "No, I will not have sex with you." So when we eventually do, in whichever bodies, it will be pure, perfect, and beautiful. 7 a.m. in the morning, a taxi transported to the airport, where the security said I looked younger than my old passport photo. I said, "Thank you," and they said, "Come back sometime." I said I would love to. Flight was uneventful. Chapter 14. America returned to peak. 1 dash 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 dash. The states, unified and united. Customs was lengthy. I made it through, and starting working holiday schedules at the Polaris Mall Starbucks in Columbus, Ohio. Austin was the fast food of coffee espresso manager and part of the management. I took the paycheck money after a month and quit. I left my quasi-girlfriend Nicola, or Nikita, and Ohio, mainly from boredom. In Columbus, I had a further development of awakening via Kundalini. I stumbled upon it by listening to Coldplay. Mentally, I oriented my perception to be perceptive of personalized synchronicity in an upward angle, the feelings and coinciding thoughts from the song Clocks, intertwined with chosen emotional frequencies of breath, caused dormant energy in the spine to awaken. It was the same as the cocaine experience in Colombia, only further. This awakening that halted at the third eye sparked travel. I rode a bus to Portland for the 2011 Washington State National Rainbow Family of Living Light Gathering of the Tribes. Partway, the Greyhound bus stopped in St. Louis. I was with a girl, just friends, and we missed the bus leaving to Portland. So we were stuck for 14 hours in St. Louis. I followed her and she followed me around dawn in St. Louis, getting drunk and slightly rained on. I hit on her by being honest, and her complexes held her back, but at least I helped her. The bus continued, and I met an Alaskan rainbow kid, more train hopper status though. I've always respected and liked most train kids, learned from them as well. Me and train kid arrived in Portland and hitched to the gathering. At arrival was Tem and Breezy in Seed Camp. The car that brought me in was accusing me of being a cop. Tim cleared that matter. were well met. The first half of the gathering was boring and cold, but when the last of the snow melted, it improved. I met the two Bellingham Rainbow girls again. They were very excited. The last day of the gathering, Montana mud caught on fire briefly and was saved by everybody. I left the gathering an hour before the July 4th Ohm in a car with a helpful woman who dropped me off in Portland, where I found a safe place to sleep for the night in nature behind a tire store. From there I went south to look for trimming, to Eugene first, then ping-ponging around NorCal, as well as Southern Oregon. Eugene, Oregon was first. Upon drop-off, I set to writing a sign to fly. Flying a sign is what the poor street people call taking cardboard, writing on it, and using it to get spare change, cash, or a ride. This particular one was for food at a McDonald's, so it just read hungry, and it happens that flying the hungry sign, sitting by the McDonald's doors, is very, very effective, and one almost always gets food and often money very, very quick. This was okay because I was hungry. After Eugene, I hitched all around NorCal. All around. It was the first of two attempts to find trim work. Trim work is, first off, marijuana, which I used to smoke regularly, is becoming legal in California and several other states. Still, growing it legally is complicated, usually not a legal endeavor, and connected to paranoia, therefore. Trim work, then, is the green rush, they've been calling it, is lots of street kids, traveler kids, going out west to get under-the-table cash, hopefully, for trimming the buds of the plants of the marijuana, or mota in Latin Spanish, weed. Trim work actually isn't that great. I never did it. Yet hearsay equates factory work with highly stressed, almost paranoid supervision, sometimes not even paid afterwards. Current times are a-changin', however. In an effort to find trim work, which I never attained, cities I visited were all NorCal, a little bit Southern Oregon. The veins of highways are known by travelers who hitch through hippie country, where the best ganja in this world debatably originates. The 5 freeway spans Seattle all down to LA, really Bellingham, which is the Canadian border, through Seattle and absorbs into Los Angeles, LA. Only a smatch or swathing swatch did I be, and travel to 3. South from Eugene, I went to Ashland, a technically sister town of Ashland, Ohio, of course. As Muse always appears as a service to reports of experience that in turn serve love. Always and all times needed, she appears beauty, musing soul. The Muse is all the time to help all souls as the great family. So Ashland is a sister or brother town to Ashland, Ohio. Yet the experiences that were of a new incarnation of flower with other members of the same family. I showed the first time there, walked through Whole Foods, the main park, and slept by the train tracks at night. A mistake, of course. The train tracks by the main road's bridge are, of course, a sleeping ground for many travelers. A drunken fellow homeless man shouted from fear threats. To me, he heard rustling late at the night. It made me hide deeper, and that poor soul reattained comfort. Lower on the 5 is Wairika, pronounced Y-reek-ah. A standard kind of town below that, Weed, California, which ironically has more tweakers, crystal meth heads, and spots of negative energy. I passed straight through Shasta as well, later to return ultimately, and Redding, California is very commercial, with many crackheads, drug lens and focus aside, and crosses the 299 freeway, or the Trinity Freeway it is known. Before hitting that, however, I rose back to Ashland, up through Medford and Grants Pass, and my pass was grudgingly granted. In Grants Pass, Oregon, I came across Rain. Having really nothing except some gear, this girl Cricket threw to me, whom I met briefly at a gas station, really helped me out with gear and info, just looking out for a fellow traveler. I decided stealing a pocket knife to defend myself, after Ashland, Oregon, and a tarp to protect myself from rain, both from Walmart, wouldn't really be a sin. I was correct, I feel, but I still had a measure of trouble. I first bought a candy bar with my few $. I then walked to the knife section, then the tarp department. Having stolen from corporations before, this experience bred a vow still kept to this day against theft, and learned going to many areas, including customer service, throws the camera squad. As I left the store, the security team ran up on me and said, "Walmart security, we need you come back in the store now, sir." So they escorted me in, and I said, "Look, I'm homeless, I'm sorry, I just needed a tarp for the rain and a pocket knife to defend myself from people who sleep by train tracks and under bridges. I just don't go to those places now, granted. I'll pay you all the money I have if I can not have more trouble." They called the cops. Well, a cop, actually. He immediately put me in cuffs. "This is so you know you may go to jail today," and ran my name. He couldn't find me in the system at first. My birth certificate is in that bag. He told me it takes 8 to 14 days in jail, with losing my stashed outside gear, to clear it up if I can't be found in the system. I got nervous, although, when pointed out I can see through his eyes, he had a good heart. "My heart is encased in ice right now," he plied. I said, "I know people don't respect police, who deal with criminals all day, unthanked or cared for, hated on." And the ice melted. And so forth. So I hitched on. 4 dash 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 dash. The 199 freeway, or Redwood Highway, goes to Crescent City, California. On the road onto the way in Redwood National Forest, I walked for a while with wild wiki drinkers. One had adopted the other, in a way. They were, and maybe are, in their own way, playfully and purposefully disrespectful. On my own in the Redwoods, I walked into magic. Sitting in an epic movie on a redwood stump, I ceremonially charged intentions and release in typical autoerotic. Crescent City, like it sounds, can be described the exquisite, finely pixelated crescent shore. The canned concentrations of hue. Magnificent sacred red wood tree. So real it's unreal. Massive, really. The trees are around there. On a direct note, Skyline Chili now has microwave spaghetti. That's right, microwave spaghetti. You can just pop and microwave it at 10 o'clock meal. After a medium-sized Thanksgiving meal earlier that day, it was delicious. Microwave Skyline entrees, though they need sprucing, emphasis, and which has everything to do with cherry toaster strudels. Almost no travelers, serene, sleeping by a measure of beach grains land. So the story goes, I traveled the 101 through Klamath, Oric, lagoons, and state parks to Trinidad, a misty 7-block beach town, soft and hazy. I liked the Natty food store and the locals. I didn't know this the second time. I just saw the boats in the little harbor there first, and thirdly I now recall Edwards Street. Further along, plodded through Clam Beach, caused Arcata. In this period, I still just breezed through places oft, later to return in a fullness to Arcata and others. And so I walked through Eureka, an Arcata 10,000-sized town, also 7 miles from Arcata. The best place to hitch south out of Eureka is the second exit south of Mall. On the way walking, tweakers behind bushes in a little camp by the road shouted fear-based to the journey beer, pushing, prompting an introduction with the gas station clerk and inquiry to the area. He explained they were just Utweeka, territorial of their camp, hitching and sleeping outside for a night. I then found a place to spend time in Garberville. Garberville sits in the center of the Avenue of the Giants, the largest trees in the entire world, really the most epic. So there sits my first experience in a tiny transient NorCal town. Hours just sitting on a sidewalk sometimes. Being given money without asking is the only cause of motion. Life as a meditation. Life became a meditation. For those 2 weeks, at trances at a time, really life lotused. And the lotus blossomed as moment. Though I returned briefly, I met an unexpected old friend, Anson, there. He said the dogs of travelers were a little absurd, swirling about with occasional barking as well. People call me wordsmith. I appreciate that. I also like word mage, word shaman, and curator, emphasized to cure. As a musician elder told me, there's a hole in the soul we fill with gold, then we're feeling fine. So I wrote this. Why did I type, read this word now, 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 now? To encapsulate the burning string of attention, needed to know tension, just a wick of sea, focused on this word, and now this one. Curiouser. It is like a burning string of focus. It is now. And now you are focused on this word. Now. It's always moving. It's meditation in her eyes. I've found timelessness. It stops moving and blossoms. Rich, it flourishes. It stops moving only my mind and begins moving my soul, so to speak, or so to author. So Redway and Myers Flat came later, before Tijuana, of course. To give you a scope of, I've spent time in 1,000 towns, but reasonable amounts of time in roughly 337 towns, which is then Lee, upside down, clear Lee, and 037 is Leo. The O gives it motion, and I've always been fond of 37. Blue Lake is one town over from Arcata. It is small and delightful, with, of course, a drifting, homeless, alcoholic, and tweaker component, and a casino, very spangy. Of priorite in Tarest was concentrated dankness. Fucking concentrated. These locals have such Humboldt green-orange crystallized bong pot, and there is an internationally renowned clown college there, to which I said, "What?" smiling. In Willow Creek, a few towns further east, I heard Emporary goals track changing in far. About farm labor instead of trimming in Willow Creek. Considering trim work was not happening despite immense effort in unmentioned ways, locals told me of 2 farms. Only one accessible. I walked to its entrance. From the driveway, I saw workers with hoes, and some barehanded by the ground working with the earth, dirt, soil, and land itself. Brings back memories of the Shambhala mudslide as I speak now before I went to meet the boss the next day. I ran into the workers at a bar. They bought me 2 drinks and told me how they worked. Narrow, breaking their bodies and wills, they worked 16-hour days, and I would very likely not be able to maintain it. But they said it was so good for the spirit. I moved on as a result. I wound up in historic Weaverville, flying a food sign out the grocery stair. I was purchased a natural and quality sub sandwich and given a $4. Bringing full circle to Tim. Tim is a short, dark, brown-haired, bearded man from Fort Myers, Florida, and Chicago. He really traveled much before I met him, similar to Odysseus. 5. ... I ran into Tim, plus Breezy, magically, oft. In Chico this happened, Chico a college town, though the importance was in Garberville and ultimately Big Bend, California. First in Garberville was when there was a fair measure of need developing. I was going to camp with an unknown group in one of the spots in Garberville. Tim and Breezy showed up on my way and swooped in really and brightened the scene. In the morning, the cops came and ran all our names and said soon people will start hearing how Garberville police will not be tolerating people sleeping illegally out in the open everywhere. And some of my new and old friends said, well, you know, we'll just keep coming back. And one said as a joke, being morning time, we just got here 2 hours ago, smiling. The cops even laughed a little with us on that one and bid us adios. So we drove to the hot springs, of course. Hot springs are bursting with energy, springs of energy in these nature's jacuzzis. Gathered with us, Tim and Breezy became Donnell, also from the gathering, and Tyler, who was waiting at the entrance to the springs, called Ty a year after last we talked, and also hippie-ish with a strong GDF flavor, GDF being not necessarily rainbow, though Grateful Dead family. GDF isn't UDF, per se, please. Thank you. We went to the back hot springs, the ones open to the stars at night, but less visited, and as a result open often. I took my gear and found a spot by the central fire. Yeah, and later Tim suggested a spot not by where everyone gathers. I chose one by a near swooping inversion by river's bank and pebbled stone shore. Nature began to become a wonderment, a cradle, and a nighttime spook show, with unknown sound effects new to me. However, ultimately it remains a providential structure of harmony and harbor, with stars at night overriding creature sounds in frequency in at least 2 ways of the word. Nature, with many genres, like the occasional light rock, stones rolling, a place of music, only for all 7 senses offered. Donnell is biologically half Caribbean status, and Tyler 2/3 GDF, as for nature-nurture cultures. African in some of the biology, Rasta is some of the soulology. Not that this even or odd exists. An elder human being shaped stones around the hot spring and fashioned a hot tub, a natural jacuzzi, and I met with him. He had a love for just creating and cleaning and maintaining the springs. It astounded me at first, and I felt great peace in the presence of the converse saturation as conversation. We spoke for some time. Naked girls appeared and disappeared as it was a nude beach sort of concept, NorCal being the uber hippie mecca I am discovering. beatniks like Jack Kerouac predecess or elderize hippies. On the Road meets Finnegan's Wake meets Huck Finn meets old Stephen King's fantasy worlds this creation is. This title is not a hook, because we are not fish. Will be a post-visional title. When I had hooks, they were designed to slow a rushed passerby. Now that the world's, my personal world as well too, not always rushed, and now that we've slowed down, I have recycled the hooks into safety pins useful for clearing blemish again. Safety pins, ultimately for clearing blemish. Inspiration speaking, not merely a person named Lee. As always, when it comes to traveling around Haert. Or, if my sisters and brothers wrote books, I would read portions of them, and with inspired feedback in time, and, that's a beautifully wordy title, naked and clothed, people of all types, races, and genders, usually healthy. Naked because they were at a flippin' outdoor jacuzzi. And no, this is not just a lead into sex. I would preface that for all, really. Some of these people were just, and are just, comfortable being naked in public in the hot springs. Breezy, Tim's girlfriend of now years, whom I had participated and witnessed magically reunite over many moon with Tim. She became like a fairy godmother to me, spiritually. The moonlight reflects. Another girl was in the group, golden blonde and endearingly space cadet. But really, though, she appeared ditzy. She was discovered by herself as well to be cosmic and genius, and divinely so. Just encoded. It will contextualize. I was gravitated to her moderately and profoundly at times. I forgot her earthen naming, but I remember her. Donnella is smooth, quiet, smug, subtle, gentle, and cool. We were all stand around fire and unexpected, who was probably a nerd as child. Don says, I do have a whole thing of drugs I brought. Being in the woods, just living, time gets boring sometimes. So we were curious, desirous, and some of us eager. He has acid, mushrooms, ecstasy, weed. We had whiskey in the first. I vied for X, of course. The hallucinogens are of greater nerves, consequent, lesser former interest. Ecstasy creates a controversy in the mind of first world collection consciousness, yet on its positivists, ecstasy is major portion, the to be popularized positive medley. Ecstasy equals compassion, beauty, grace, love, and appersand, fluidity, free, fearless communication. It, with combinations of DMT, plus fourth, the single effective enlightiania, socket velocitation, propulsion, scient. Such energy, gentle, thick pulsings of Mother's Mary. Most wanted mostly others. I stayed ecstatic focused. The old book, Spiral Trinity, laid portaling the surface of nowhere, California, Big Bend beginning to kick in. Cocktaleidioscopes of substances. 8 of us, late midday with 2 dogs. 6, ... To begin with, I was still in create inner trust with faith mode. feeling the fears of losses of others now, granting solace to the figments of beauty shining through keyholes of future's door. So I felt and still feel pain. She was blonde and 19. I automatically desired, still in incompletion mode. Now, I don't automatically give in to want unless it is very right and does not imbalance. So drugs, 2/3 ecstasy, 1/3 LSD, alcohol and weed, on my end, different for the others, began. I walked through tall grassies with blonde girl, maybe Aaron or Andy, ditzy girls, hidden intelligences, began to surface and become her. She started simple knowing, childlike, super old wisdoms and awarenesses. I became schooled and stepped up to new level. She stopped in the grasses and tall gray, white dandelion-like weed grove and said she could just stay right there. I found a world in 5 feet of nature because of her. And so we gravitated back to the center fire area. It started to darken, and each of us woke up in different ways. One, then the other. Tyler saying, "So Lee, explain this book," the Spiral Trinity book. And Donnell, Breezy, Brianna, me, then Tem. I even sang a little bit. Pretty well, so Tem surprised us, as alternately, again and again, it would shift, quickly focus, and to Tem, open. He would become Godhead, say things with truth that froze conversation. Somehow people just knew he was right. At the times he out of nowhere came through higher self. I wish I could remember his specifics, but there will be more from elsewhere in this. And Tyler went into a story about how he was reasonably sure he was an ant in a former lifetime. He said it was nuts. Giant pincers on your head, mandibling about, bite someone's head off with your fucking face. Tyler said he had an evil bead and stone case, which did have a spider sticker on it. He was on mainly hallucinogenics compared to the rest of us. So we migrated towards the riverside again, and Breezy became fairy godmother role. I kept saying I had fear rising up, and she gave me soothing cures, words in specific now forgotten. Both Tem and Breezy have cured me of much fear over time. However, the fear kept rising that dusk evening. It grew, and a climax pulled us to itself, where Potato swims into the river and struggled to pull a rock up from the bottom, continuing to claw at the rock, visibly, emotionally desiring human hands, like most of her family, barking and clawing more and more. It was unearthing of energy, like a suspense movie, bubbling from dormant river abyss. Pre-ancient energy. Potato knew how to go straight to it. Something about travelers and their dogs, really. And time went by. Tweakers showed crystal methamphetamine chronic user addicts up in the woods, basically making us a little more nervous, but didn't bother us much. Tyler tripping very much at this point. Left with the tweakers on one of the infamous tweaker missions. We were worried for him, and when he finally got back, he said he was fine. 7 ... One day beyond, Tyler bragged to me about how days afore he had slept with Blonde. It wasn't total braggadocio, and he said it was okay sex. Not very good. She was not very active. So there were 2 eccentrics, Donnell and 19-year-old woman with blonde hair who all left Big Bend in Donnell's car. We were finished with Big Bend by and large. After 18 minutes of driving the very windy forest tree dirt road out of Big Bend to civilization, the tire flattened and popped. We pulled it to side and started hitching to McCloud, which is on the way to Shasta. Walking on the road, with, I theorized, the name Justin in the memories, we got to a mild mountain overlook, and Justin, who used to say, "Yeah, you stay up on your hill, praying for rain. I'm gonna be down in the trenches, fighting Satan's army." Started picking up pretty sizable rocks, really, and throwing them off the side of the little mountain into the little ravine. And when Donnell asked him to please stop, he said, "I like throwing rocks off the side of this mountain. It makes me feel good." Yep, that was Justin, or probably Justin. So jingles and jaggles through McCloud, talking with tweaked out locals, replacing the flat tire after crashing in the Shasta Tire parking lot. In the car, partying with cool passerby couple, drinking 2 to 3 large beers, we made it Shasta. Me, Donnell, and Blonde were referred to Castle Lake and the Buddha Hole. Still more references were to Castle Lake. So we got there and asked where the spot was and is, and we were there. A lake in a valley in a mountain range, and a crystal-y fairy or fae embedded hippie woodworked flame-pitted magical ass lake place. Evening descends towards so as to ascend in, and we loose crescent around the main energy vortex cyclone, 6 feet by the stone, used sometimes as a free food in the woods, not and Zuzu's percolator kitchen micro mountain, and met Shastafari of the current called upon. After climbing the social energetic reaction chain links, Bobby, the spiritual alpha shaman, became called upon to clarify my progression. He said, "You can go in the front door of the magic of Shasta and its spirits, along with the 5th dimensional secret portal in the back of side window. The fairy springs were elusive, yet I barely dabbled. Separate, the Shambhala, former 76 bone marrow of the earth circulator, metaphysics store, explained the fear removal around the 13th crystal Centro-Americana skull in transition towards skull consciousness within Lee self. We, Donnell, and no longer with the cool blonde girl, remained in Castle, 7+ kilometers squiggle from the Shasta City, California proper. 8 dash 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 dash. Donnell and Lee are departed on another trim work mission. Shasta, a main spiritual mecca and geographic rushing root chakra, is still unfinished in the writer's life in that. Having already trim work searched the freeway personally, we figured a more obscure and subtle path, going along the road, would be the best place to find work and growers. in background. I will now emit only a few locative and locational proper known nouns until weed legalities evolve further. We did not achieve our goals, though we got closer. First was a possibly shell, and stayed for days, meeting locals, going to River Spot, sleeping in Toyo or Hond Green Civic. We meet two others who had been on mission for days, hopeful or unsuccessful. We came to eventually realize it was too early for trim season. In another unmentioned town name, a woman appeared saying she had husband just died, and her young daughter said we were cute. She had a farm and said it was too early to trim. I thought very frustrated of being on the farm ASAP. We wound up back to Shasta and through historic Weaverville. On the way, magically ran back into Tyler, who now goes by Ty, picked him up and returned to Shasta. At Castle Lake, we peaked before the epic South began, all the way to El Salvador. Peeked around the lake. Light Hawk had several crystal singing bowls. Will appeared, along with Woody in the background and a crew I was close with that day, whom included part goddess Ivy, her sister, and Justin, a new and different Justin, very Primus-like, though the same name as the formerly written, Christ-complexed with a literally homosexual sidekick disciple. They are festival goers. Justin, the new crew, was very affected by the lake and very into yoga. Ivy and Justin and Ivy's sister, and almost entirely me, started meditating, becoming naked and doing yoga in the sacred sun, glowing essence, golden micro-orbed, stempling, diffusion, radiated and pixeled our auric space, became the spirit of Castle Lake, tenfold crystals rising out of water's surface, receptors as reflected sunlight inducing a slant into a shard of the group, hallucinated, rising magi spirits of beauty from the quiet until perceived and valued spiritually Castle Lake. There was talk of a lake still higher up, the mountain Shasta representing the peak where this portion ends. Fairy Ponds, Fairy Lake, takes 85 minutes rattlesnake walks to arrive. Around the lake are the two super ferny, fragile and isolated Fay meadows. Few go to aka grassy fields. I drank a cupped hands almost full of blessed, pronounced blessed, graced, immaculate, sacred water. Poem 2, Loop and Center, Squared. You made my face cry like a voice. Eyes, orgasm, clarity, cascada. And the point moves around to form a circle around a point. Elliptical. I care about your tremble. All alone, I've cared about how you've cared about me. a bout of and the spin pulls us away, gravity swims. Demising thwirl, we braid glimpsing. The center we needed, yes. No, another orbit, pain, ting. We have our loves. Inspire the moment, still. And the point moves a planet around, aching from motion away from the core ache. Crawl, run about the vine, unwrap, heart, replace, like pure hair vein fed outer iris to in tear. The black-white center. However, star, I, time to one.